Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Social Work 401. We're so excited to have you all present today. So, we are hosting our annual alumni panel, and this is really exciting because it's just a great opportunity to learn from alumni, to build community with one another in addition to these alum, and to just think about what it means to be exploring challenges around social justice as you think about your work beyond undergrad. So, we are really, really excited to have these esteemed alum in addition to an alum who is not necessarily an alum from the University of Michigan for her undergrad, but we'll talk more about her experience thus far as staff within the minor and also as an MSW student as well. But again, we're looking forward to this conversation and look forward to having just a bigger deep dive around these lessons learned and how you take those forth in your own journey. So this might be a little bit cumbersome, but I kind of want us to do a little bit of an introduction before these folks start with their introduction, and hopefully they can hear you okay. First, I should introduce myself. So my name is Amber, work within the minor as staff, and then we also have...
I pass the mic. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Richard Schuster. Hi, Amy. Hi, Chelsea.
Hi.
I am also teaching one of the 401 sections and am the director of the CASC minor. I'm a faculty member here in social work, so thrilled to be here.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name is Emily Damstetter. I graduated last spring in 2018, and I majored in communications, and I had a minor in CASC and a minor in Spanish, and I'll tell you more about myself soon.
Hi, everyone. My name is LJ. I'm a current first-year master's student at the School of Information, but I did my undergrad here in BCN and English and then got a CASC minor, and I will also say more in a little bit.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Violeta Danawa. I am a CASC program assistant. I'm excited to talk to you all about that work that I'm doing, and I'm also a first-year MSW student in the School of Social Work and a healing justice practitioner in Detroit.
And then Amy and Chelsea, if you want to quickly introduce yourselves as well.
Sure.
Cool.
Go for it, Chelsea.
All right, cool. Well, hi, everyone. My name's Chelsea, and I graduated back in 2013 with a degree in sociology, and I minored in Spanish and CASC.
And hi, everyone. I'm Amy Nabab, and I graduated also in 2013, and I was a women's studies and psychology double major with the CASC minor, and then I went on to the MSW program right after. So I graduated with my master in social work, too, from University of Michigan.
Awesome. Thank you all. So we're going to get started. In a couple more minutes, we'll have another panelist, Brittany Williams, who will also introduce herself, who's an alum from the program as well. But I'm also hoping that you all can sort of introduce yourselves just really quickly. Your name, pronoun, and one word about your experience with CASC. We'll pass the mic. Starting with Joe.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joe Galura, the academic advisor for CASC. I also teach 401. Hi to the folk that still remember me.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, Joe.
Everyone, my name is Brandon Pope. I am a senior, obviously, in the CASC minor. And I'm sorry, I forgot the question completely. One word of CASC. Awesome.
My name's Brianna Ledbetter. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And one word to describe CASC is just expanding.
My name is Lauren. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a public policy major with a CASC minor, obviously, and community would be my word.
I'm Ellery Rosenzweig. I'm a senior in CASC and so in psychology, and my word would be reflective.
Hi, everyone. My name is Abby. I'm a senior studying neuroscience with the minor in CASC. My pronouns are she, her, hers. My word would be empowered.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jack Griffin. Pronouns are he, him, his. I am a senior majoring in business and minoring in CASC, and I think I would describe the minor as meaningful.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eliza, a senior with a major in business, minor in CASC. Pronouns she, her, hers, but I also like they, them, theirs. And my word would be passionate.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sophia. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a senior also, majoring in business like my other table mates. And one word to describe my experience would also be reflective.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm she, her, hers. I'm a senior studying psychology, and my word would be inspiring.
Hi everyone, my name is Kamar Coleman Bird. I'm a senior studying business, minor in CASC, he, him, his, and my word would be impactful.
Hi everyone, I'm Rima. I am a senior studying business, minor in CASC, pronouns she, her, and hers, and I think my word would be enlightening.
Hello, I'm Allie, a senior studying psychology with a minor in CASC. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I would describe it as opportunity.
I'm Annie. I'm a senior studying psychology in CASC as well. She, her, hers, and I would describe it as eye-opening.
Hi, I'm Riley. I use she, her, hers. I'm a senior, and I think my word would also be reflective. That's repeating, but.
I'm Kylie. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and my word would be empowering.
Hi everyone, I'm Maddie. I'm a senior studying English in CASC. I use the pronouns she, her, hers, and the word I would use would be hands-on.
Hi, I'm Dana. I'm a senior studying international studies, and then I have a double minor in women's studies in CASC. I use the pronouns she, her, and hers, and my word would be engaging.
Hi, I'm Kayla. I'm a senior studying creative writing and lit with minors in women's studies and CASC. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and my word would be meaningful.
Hi, I'm Grishma. I'm a senior studying BCN and with a CASC minor. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and a word would be inspiring.
Hello, everyone. My name is Demario Sloan. I'm a senior studying biomolecular science with a minor in CASC, and my word would be informative.
Hi everyone, my name is Mari. Mari, it's fine if you can't roll your R's. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. Gender and health major, CASC minor, and I think my word would be responsibility.
Hi, I'm Erica. I use she and her pronouns. I'm a senior studying business with a minor in CASC, and my word would be important.
Hi, I'm Izzy. I use she, her, hers, and I studied health and fitness, kinesiology. And my word would be fun.
Hi, I'm Emma. I am studying poli-sci and minoring in CASC, and my word would be engagement.
Hi, I'm Becca. My pronouns are she and hers. I'm studying economics with a minor in business and CASC, and my word would be powerful.
Hi, I'm Chloe. I'm a senior majoring in communications and minoring in CASC. My word would be perspective changing.
Hi, I'm Libby, majoring in art and design and minoring in CASC. And my pronouns are she, her, hers, and exciting is my word.
Hi, everybody. My name is Eddie Williams, and my pronouns are he, him, his. And I'm a double major studying acting, performance, and psychology, and minor in CASC. And my word would be eye-opening as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Hall. I'm a senior studying economics. Pronouns are he, him, his, and my word would be important as well.
Hi, I'm Jackie. She, her, hers. I'm a senior studying political science with minors in history and CASC, and my word would be dedicated.
Hi, hi. My name is Michael Stipa. Pronouns are he, him, his, and I would one word, inspirational.
I'm Cassidy. Pronouns she, her, hers. My major is art and design, and my word would be experience.
Hi, I'm Aisha. She, her, hers. I'm a senior. I study Spanish and CASC, and my word is inclusive.
Hi, my name is Camille Hollins. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and my word would be uplifting.
Hello. My name is Emily Fisher. I am a senior studying neuroscience. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and my one word would be passion.
Hi, everybody. My name's Amanda. I'm a senior studying business, minoring in CASC. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and my one word would be meaningful.
Hi, I'm Abby, senior studying psychology, minoring in CASC, and I would describe CASC as community-oriented.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I go by she, her, hers. I am double majoring in anthropology and creative writing, and my word is balance.
I'm Yvonne. I'm a senior studying sociology with a CASC minor, and my pronouns are he, she, or they, and my one word would be important.
My name is Brett. My pronouns are he, him, his. My one word would be interactive.
I am Christina. I use she, her, hers. My major is psychology, minor in CASC, and my word would be growth.
Thank you all. So I know there's a lot of time embedded in everyone just sharing their name, their pronoun, what they study, and takeaways around CASCing. But again, we really see this as a two-way street. We want to build community and to engage one another and to foster those connections. And so as we kind of think about these takeaways that we'll all gain from alum, knowing that there's so much that you all have to offer as well in your questions and your reflections and at some of the table discussions that we'll do at the latter end of this session. So thank you all for just sharing out a little bit of who you are and what you've gained from CASC thus far. So to segue us, I want to introduce and bring into the forefront our alum once again. So maybe if each of you can share a little bit about what you've been up to since you've graduated.
So I have been taking a gap year. Like I said, I graduated in the spring. I'm working at a restaurant in town, and I'm scheduled to take the GRE to hopefully get my master's in journalism. I'll be taking the GRE in March, and then I have a couple trips planned to travel internationally. Traveling was something that was really important that I do before I jump back into school again. So yeah, going to Costa Rica in March for 10 days, and then still in the works, but hopefully Australia in June.
So I graduated in 2015, and right after graduating, I started working at the Spectrum Center. I worked there for 3 years in a couple different capacities. So I was our campus and community engagement specialist, so I did a lot of work with students and event planning. Then I oversaw all of our support services, including like a peer mentorship program, a group for first years. And then in my last year at Spectrum, I was the education and training program manager. So I oversaw all of our like workshops and trainings, the curriculum for that, assessment, things like that. And last fall, I started my master's in information science. And so I'm back in school, which is an experience.
And for alum, should we jump here? Okay, so I'll give you a little bit of background about me. I have a very winding, nonlinear road. So my background is in sociology. I got my bachelor's in sociology from Wayne State University, and I got my first master's in sociology at Michigan State University. And so I guess I'll start with the second master's and make it kind of quick. After I finished my master's degree in sociology, I literally moved overseas after maybe 3 months. And it really was serendipity. I got a text message. Somebody said, hey, there's an opportunity overseas. Do you want to go? And because, I'm me, I said, yeah. Did a little bit of background research, of course. Spoke to the people in Chicago who were kind of heading it up. And kind of moved and did program development and taught English in the southwestern region of Angola. And I did that for some time until the economy told me to come back home. And yeah, so I can answer more questions about what it looked like to move from a social science to doing something like program development and now finding myself back in social work, which is slightly different and slightly similar to what I was doing overseas.
And then Chelsea and maybe Amy after.
Cool. Hi, everyone. So when I graduated back in 2013, I joined the Peace Corps, and I was in Peace Corps Panama. And my program was teaching English, leadership, and life skills. And so what that consisted of was kind of a variety of projects that one of my main jobs was in the school. I had a K through 12 school, and I was really helping my teachers kind of improve their teaching methodologies. But I also was doing teacher training workshops in the province and in my entire province for all of the teachers in the area. I did a lot of multi-grade trainings, trying to help teachers that don't speak any English learn basics to be able to go back to their smaller schools. And I did a lot of leadership training for mainly for university English students, kind of teaching in English but leadership classes. And then I extended a third year because I really enjoyed my 2 years of service, and I extended a third year as a regional coordinator. And in this role, I kind of had a really unique position of acting as a mentor for the volunteers currently serving in their 2 years, and as kind of this middle person between the local government agencies and the Peace Corps office. So really trying to maintain relationships, build relationships, kind of monitor that, help volunteers that were currently serving, develop new communities. So really community building, going out to the communities, talking to people, and understanding what their needs and wants were, and seeing if we were a match to put a Peace Corps volunteer there in the future. So I did that for 3 years in total, and then I left in 2017, and I have been since. I'm in grad school right now in Monterey, California. I go to the Middlebury Institute of International Studies, and I'm studying public administration with a specialization in intercultural competence. So I'm kind of, I graduated in May, and I'm in this position of really trying to understand, doing these education enrichment programs and understanding, like kind of coordinating those programs for nonprofits domestically, but understanding how that can interact with diversity, inclusion, and using this new specialization that I have to either, you go into kind of a consulting route or bringing that into whatever workplace I am in, into training and kind of capacity building in that field. And just one little side note, I've done a little bit of side work in criminal justice. So in undergrad, I was really involved in PCAP. So I don't know if there's any PCAPers around. But I also, since being in California, I've done some work at a juvenile detention center, kind of doing for violence prevention. And I'm also going to be participating actually this upcoming weekend in a project called the Alternatives to Violence Project. It's AVP. It's actually around the country. So I'll be doing the basics workshop this weekend. So I'm still, as much as I've had this international focus, I do still have this domestic passion as well. So that's kind of my background. I know it's a lot. So if there's any questions, I'm here to answer. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Amy again. And Chelsea, I also was in PCAP. I can't believe we didn't overlap.
I know. We connected. We must have crossed paths.
Yeah, we must have known each other. So I graduated in 2013, and then the fall I was in the MSW program. And I was actually in Katie's cohort. There was a small cohort of people who were interested in youth development, youth empowerment work. And I was in that program and knew that I wanted to be working with young people and doing community change work. And so when I finished up my MSW, I was looking for work in Chicago, and I found restorative justice, which let me do program development in a school, but then also work directly with young people. And so that became a really good fit for me. I was working in a Chicago high school for 3 years doing that restorative justice work. And then after, it was summer of 2017, my nonprofit wasn't going to be returning to the school I had been at. And so my partner and I were deciding, should we stay in Chicago or should we move? And so we decided to move to Colorado. And a lot of that was because we like Colorado and we were tired of winter and we were ready for a change. And so in the fall of 2017, I got a job doing restorative justice in Boulder's district attorney's office. So for me, that was trying to see what the school to prison pipeline looked like down the pipeline. And so I was within the criminal justice system, but still doing restorative justice work. And so young people and adults who would be referred for low-level offenses could do restorative justice as a way to handle their criminal charges. So I was really passionate about the model and the programming, but day to day, my work was much less relational. And so after like 9 months in that job, I was looking at jobs in a school. And so now I'm in a school. So I left the job in Boulder. I took the summer to travel, and now I'm in ECE, so preschool through 8th grade school, doing restorative justice again. And so in this school, I'm a school employee. So I work for Denver Public Schools. So in Chicago, I was working for a nonprofit, and now I'm working within the school district doing restorative justice. Yeah, and that's where I'm at right now.
Thank you, Amy. So I want to welcome Brittany Williams to our panel and just give her an opportunity to share a little bit about who she is, kind of her work when she was an undergraduate student, perhaps a little bit about your MSW and what you've been up to now.
Hey, thanks. Sorry that I was tardy. I was trying to not spin out and die on the way from Detroit. So my name is Brittany. I'm a 2016 graduate from the sociology program here. I was a CASC minor. Kind of found CASC in my second round of undergraduating because the first round I had some really difficult situations I had with my family and my mother becoming ill. So when I came back to finish school, I was actually 27, and CASC had become a thing, and I chose that because I'm very passionate about social justice and social change. So graduated in 2016, went directly into the MSW program, and graduated from that in December of 2017. While I was here, I was on the Aging and in Families and Society track with a focus on interpersonal practice. Although it is very uncommon, I also completed a global field placement, and so was able to kind of contextualize the things that I was learning through an international lens. In Australia, I worked on a suicide prevention team there. It's been almost a year that I've been working at my current position, which is as a medical case manager at HELP, which is Health Emergency Lifeline Programs in Detroit. It's a social service agency that's also recently opened a health clinic, which is the first LGBTQ-focused health clinic in the state of Michigan, which is Corktown Health Center. So between HELP, we're specifically working with people who are living with HIV. And then on the Corktown Health side, anyone can come, but the majority of our clients are either folks that we're already serving on the social service side, or very often are folks who are seeking gender-affirming treatment in the health center. So really enjoy that. I'm also very passionate about older adults, and so a lot of what I've done as a case manager is provide specialized care to our clients who are 55 years of age or older, and help to kind of shed light on issues which haven't really been considered as much for people who are aging with HIV. The initial kind of consensus in the earlier stages of HIV as an epidemic was that people wouldn't live, this generation actually wouldn't be alive now. And so there's kind of a lot of retroactive figuring out how to deal with this demographic and trying to understand what comorbidities might impact how they're living with HIV, what it means to be a long-term survivor when you've been taking antiretrovirals for 20 years, 30 years, and how hard that is on your body. Things like memory loss in HIV, and one of the biggest pieces of remaining healthy is keeping your viral load down. If you can't remember to take your meds, like what does that mean? So I've been kind of like the resident agitator at my agency, which is part of why I loved being here, because that was something that was fostered both as a CASC student and as an MSW student, is that that's part of what social work and social justice is about, is being like, hi, I know you probably don't want to hear it, but this is important, so I'm going to tell you about it. And that's what I do. So, yeah.
Does this work? Oh, it does. That's awesome. Okay, so we have a couple of questions that we just want to kind of ask of the panel, and we know that that you all have generated some questions, or perhaps have some questions that you're thinking about. So we'll kind of first start, and then we'll open it up to all of you. But we wanted to start by just asking you all to just reflect back on your experience, both in CASC and also at U of M, and to think a little bit about how your time in the minor and at U of M influenced your opportunities and your experiences kind of after grad school. I don't know if there's someone who would like to start us off, perhaps.
After grad school or after undergrad?
After undergrad, sorry.
Oh God, I'm not there yet.
Amy, you want to get us started? Start with our RFRs.
Yeah. And so in undergrad, I was involved in PCAP and intergroup relations as a facilitator. I also did organizing with Professor Marcus and then worked on gender inclusive housing, so a campaign with the Spectrum Center and a coalition of students. And so all of those experiences really helped me test out what I liked and didn't like in social change work. And so I knew I cared a lot about community organizing, and from that I liked working as a facilitator and training. And so in grad school, I think I was able to fine tune those skills. And then upon leaving grad school, like I know I love running groups, I love facilitating and training. And although I can like think and do policy, like as I started to enter early in my career, I was like, even if I could be good at it, it doesn't bring me as much joy as the one-to-one work or small group work or being able to work directly with young people every day. And so I think undergrad, and especially with the CASC minor, helped expose me to lots of different settings and types of work to figure out what are my strengths and what do I like and how can I build on that. Because at the end of the day, it's great to have a job where I get to do something that I feel like I'm successful at and is also helpful. So that's a little bit to start.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Chelsea, you want to jump in?
Yeah.
And then we'll
I definitely agree with Amy on that. And I also wanted to say, I forgot the last time, that I'm so inspired by all the variety of degree programs that are represented in CASC now. I think that's so incredibly important as these conversations that I know you guys are having, to have the different perspectives from the different disciplines. So for that, thank you all that are part of CASC now. And I would say that I have always put everything, I am only where I am today because of my experience at Michigan. And I think mainly because of the ability to be challenged into having these conversations, that before I was at Michigan, and especially in CASC and a lot of the conversations I had within PCAP, I wasn't having these conversations. So I think challenging my perspective, challenging my opinions really continue to push me to like dive deeper and try to understand a little bit more of like what is happening around me and where do I actually get fulfilled. And so I only ended up doing Peace Corps because of the different type of experiences I had at Michigan. I've worked at the Ginsburg Center, so I really have always enjoyed, I've always enjoyed the human interaction. And so I don't know if there's, I always look back to PCAP and CASC as being my kind of the one that pushed me in the direction, the two things that pushed me in the direction to end up where I'm at. And I think it's from just the conversations and being inspired by the people that are around you that are doing really cool things and kind of inspiring me to want to do better things for myself, but also for for the people around me. So, yeah.
Great. We'll open it up to, you don't necessarily have to all go in order, but yeah, Emily, you want to
Cool.
get us started?
Is this working? Okay, I don't know. So you guys made me think of this, but I call it my cell buzz feeling. It's like where you cells feel super alive and like you're super passionate about something, and sometimes it makes you uncomfortable, sometimes it makes you nervous, but you're like, I want to chase this. And I got those moments through CASC. I took intergroup dialogue and then project outreach, criminal and juvenile justice, because they fulfilled some of the requirements for the CASC minor. And as a fresh graduate who's still kind of figuring out what's next, what I want to pursue, and in what timeline I want to pursue them, I think starting with those moments and starting with those classes and those conversations that make you feel really excited and make you feel like really passionate and that you want to learn more about it and you want to be engaged in whatever topic it is, that's whenever I get a little overwhelmed or a little unsure about what path I'm taking. I always go back to those, and so some of them also were, in my Spanish classes, and Latin American culture like absolutely fascinates me. So that's why I picked Costa Rica to travel to. So yeah, I think it can be a little bit overwhelming once you guys graduate. If not, props to you, because I'm just drowning, not really. But yeah, to just like remember those moments that made you feel really passionate and to follow those.
So, can you all hear me? Okay, great. So a lot of my sort of social justice education started on the internet, but I have this very specific memory of being a freshman, and I lived in Oxford, and our diversity peer educator, our DPE, had this board. It must have been like in September, and it was something like, what does social justice mean to you? And I remember looking at that and being like, what is social justice? Like, I've never even heard of that. And thanks to, conversations I started having, both like in terms of like reading blogs on the internet and conversations with res staff, I was like, oh, it's like all of these things that I have experienced but never had a name for. And so to kind of have that, suddenly have the language to talk about my experiences in a way that was like, I'm not the only one that experiences this. There's like a name for this. There's a phenomenon, and I'm not, it's not all in my head. It was really, really empowering and liberating. And that's kind of how I started to get into social justice work. But it wasn't until I joined res staff and took a sort of a staff class for community assistance. And at the time it was run by a woman named Trey. She was the supervisor for all of the diversity peer educators, and she was one of the facilitators. And so that was the first time I'd ever been in kind of a dialogue type situation where we were talking about social identities. I was engaging with other people who maybe didn't have as much familiarity as I did. And that was I really enjoyed that experience. And I remember Trey asking me at the end of that class, what do you want to do next? Like, are you going to be an RA, and, a PASS, or what do you want to do? And I was like, oh, I want to be like an academic advisor, because I'm just really interested in that. And she just looks at me and she goes, because you talk like a DPE. And I was like, what? What does that mean? Yeah. And she's like, well, like the way that you engage like in conversation and stuff like that, those are really, really good skills to have as a diversity peer educator. She was like, you should look into it, because I think you'd like it. And she kind of planted the seed, and I was like, oh no, now I have to actually look at like being a diversity peer educator. And I was like, oh no, I actually really want to do this now. And I say, oh no, because I am not resistant to change, but I like knowing what I want to do and having a plan. And so this kind of threw a wrench into it. But I became a diversity peer educator. And it was really interesting being a diversity peer educator, I was working with IGR, their facilitation classes, and also being a student activist, to be in those different spaces. And I think one of the things that CASC helped me with, just through my instructors and like the different types of classes, was to look at like, what does social justice work look like in different spaces? Because as a student activist and someone who holds like pretty radical politics, I was like, let's burn this down. But that's not necessarily something that I can do when I'm a diversity peer educator or, facilitating a dialogue, right? That my role is different. The context of the work that I'm doing is different. And so, there are things that I can do as an activist or, just in my day-to-day life, but I can't necessarily act like that all the time, right? You have to be able to work in different contexts, and that takes a lot of different skills, which was really helpful, because once I went into these spaces, like knowing like, okay, in this space, like I am an educator, right? So I am going to really work on like my active listening and, being empathetic and like really, walking with people through their journeys. Whereas as an activist, I might be like, we're trying to like protest this or like change this policy, and we're not engaging in the same way. And so I think that what was useful with CASC, and I even think about like my Foundations of Social Work class, was to look at like, what do your values look like in different contexts? And to see it not as a, like, I'm compromising my values or I'm abandoning my values, but just being able to see, like, I am still who I am. I still hold these values and these politics, and they show up different in different spaces. And so I think that that was something that was really important and was really helpful for me. And so as I worked with CASC and got involved in like student organizations and stuff like that, I started to work with the Spectrum Center. And I really liked working with students. So as a diversity peer educator, as a facilitator, right, you do a lot of work with students. And so I thought I might be interested in higher education. And the Spectrum Center has a position that is specifically for your post-bachelor's. You don't need a master's degree. And that position was open, and I was like, great, like, let me see if, you know, higher ed is where I want to be. It ended up, I mean, I don't think higher ed, I still have a soft spot for higher ed, but I don't think it's where I want to be. But I think one of the things that I also really appreciated about CASC was that it kind of showed me that, like, there's not sort of one path to any kind of social justice work. Like, even my Foundations of Social Work class, while we were talking about social work, we were talking about sort of the underlying like principles that social work is based on, but we also talked about like how that looks in different areas, that like social work, if that's not for you, that's okay, and you can still be doing social justice work, and that there are different ways of like taking these same like theories and frameworks and principles and making them work in wherever you are at. And so that, I think, is something that kind of got me to where I am right now.
Fine work. Fine work? It doesn't. Okay, great. I'm glad I tried that. What about here? Okay, awesome. So in undergrad, I was a student activist. I learned about the term a scholarly activist. I was in love with research. So I was a part of the Ronald E. McNair program. I'm not sure if that's still around, but it was a part of a federal TRIO program. I was one of the many students at the time who went down to New Orleans to help with the rebuilding after Hurricane Katrina. And I was involved with being from Detroit and being from the east side of Detroit. I was really concerned with being not only plugged in with organizations at the university level, but also in the community, because there were elders there that were really important to me. I worked with the organization called MCAWI, the Michigan Emergency Committee Against War and Injustice. And while the academic part is really important, for me, social justice is the spiritual level, the self level, the familial level, the community level, the state level, policy, etc., and the systemic intergenerational stuff that we inherited and co-create in some way, shape, or form, or dismantle in some way, shape, or form every day. I think the most important thing, I just did an essay for a professor here, Professor Justin Hodge, and I realized that the first time I really, really thought about social justice was probably in like 1993 or 1994 with Tupac's song, Brenda's Got a Baby. And the song was about this 12 to 15-year-old girl who lived in the inner city who found herself impregnated by someone in her family. So we have this hip-hop song tackling issues around class, tackling issues around race, tackling issues around sexual assault at a time when not a lot of music was doing that. And so while I didn't have the language at, I don't know how old I was, 8, right, or whatever, of social justice, there was something that resonated. So when I think it was Emily said, when you get that cellular buzz and you don't have the language for it, it's really critical to pay attention to. Like nowadays we have critical media theorists who analyze lyrics in different genres all over the place. I think I heard somebody say that they were in neuroscience and also being a CASC minor. There's so much research, more and more, coming out about the way that all the isms that we talk about, racism, the phobias, homophobia, all this stuff, is not just systemic. It's not just university policy. It's literally in our brain cells. It literally has taken home in our DNA. We talk about epigenetics, and it's very controversial to talk about the way intergenerational trauma happens. And I'm a social science social worker, and I'm still like, neuroscience is important because racism lives in our bodies, you know? And it doesn't matter the race of the body, because what we know about epigenetics is that when a gene is triggered in some way, shape, or form, then you have certain things that get expressed. So whether it's somebody clutching their purse at a very inconvenient time when people are getting on the elevator, or whether it's walking past a cop and a black person is like, I don't know about whatever the thing is, you know, sometimes it's cognitive and it's conscious. And sometimes it's literally in our nervous systems. And so it's very important to think about the intersection of neuroscience and these harder sciences and social justice, because it really does live everywhere. And so I think there are these very small moments when we could think about what social justice means to us. For me, I realized that the first time I realized I was black, I was probably 7. And then the first time I realized I was a dark-skinned black person, I was probably 8. And at the moment you realize that you're a thing, right? Whatever your cultural background is, and that at one point we were all playing on a playground together, like hanging out. And it's funny, okay, last science thing is that the brain crystallizes racial difference and how to indicate whether racial difference is bad or good, for example, by neurologically by like 3 or 4. So the fact that we're doing this work now is like critical. And it's also I think it was Amy who's in K through, like, this work is for the generations like coming behind us, because they're going to grow up and be voters. They're going to grow up and be teachers. And our job, I think, as social justice advocates is to kind of like really help shape what that means and who's going to be guiding our lives and our futures while we're aging and getting older, and all those things and the things that will impact us. So I'll segue to my colleague to my left on that note.
Okay, again, I think that the biggest thing that CASC did for me in terms of kind of propelling me toward the path that I'm on is make me comfortable with being a disruptor. So like I mentioned earlier, that I kind of feel that way at my agency. I was definitely that way as an MSW student, and as an undergrad, kind of found my way as a CASC student. I'm from Rochester, and people who are kind of familiar with Jack and Jill's, like kind of this very snooty organization meant to kind of bring upper middle and upper class black folks together who might be in like predominantly white areas. And so a lot of what informed my upbringing was this idea that respectability was my key to success, and that being anti-stereotypical of all things black and black women in particular was the only way that I was going to succeed. But I think as black folks and other people of color in this room can attest to, like, respectability politics does not save you, and it does not exempt you from injustice. And so I think when I came back to school, I was a little bit older, and so I was a little more like, I don't care if you don't see it for me, because you're still going to see me. We're going to get the same degree. So I felt more comfortable being vocal, and kind of found my voice and found a way to utilize kind of the talking white and all the other respectable pieces that people felt made me a different kind of black to kind of infiltrate and then disrupt. And so, for instance, one of the things that I did was I got the guts to go and speak before the board, like the universities, what are they? Thank you. The regents, speak before the regents. And I basically like dragged them, but with very, like it was basically like if I'm cursing you out without profanity and with GRE words. And so like that's my specialty, right? Is that you think like, oh my gosh, you're so eloquent. I love how you talk and that's so wonderful. And that's great. And I'm going to talk just like that while I'm telling you how messed up you have my community. And so like that was very empowering for me, and has really made me feel comfortable in spaces where I am meant to feel uncomfortable when I'm acting as an advocate, whether it's for older adults. I'm a queer Black woman, so when I'm talking about people who hold the same identities as me, being able to speak up and speak boldly, and also to weather the backlash that comes with that, because a lot of my experience also in CASC and even in the MSW program as well was that as I was finding that voice, when it started to mean that I wasn't hand-holding and sugarcoating in the classroom, then I was mean. And then it was a personal attack. And then it was, I step out to the water fountain and you're crying because like, why don't you just understand like that I just don't get it? I do understand that. And I was really nice to you when I said that I didn't get it. But like, it's not my job to coddle you. And so getting comfortable with that and understanding that that boldness sometimes means that you don't have to take the time to do the educating that people should be doing for themselves, especially if they've had the privilege to not have to think about these things before they got here. That was very empowering for me, and I think has been a major contributor to the success that I've had on behalf of my clients.
Thank you all so much for just being really open and honest and authentic in your own sort of lived experiences. And I think even what you each have shared, there's almost a sort of framework or a philosophy or vision around social change and how that's kind of played out in your own work. And something that we've been talking about in class is what is our philosophy around social change and how do our core values ground that? And so curious to hear from you all some reflections, both on your own core values around social change, but also kind of piggybacking off of a little bit of what LJ was talking about earlier in terms of these challenges or tensions. What have been some moments where your values have been tested or pushed? How have you navigated that in the work that you do or otherwise? And anyone can jump in on that.
I'm just going to start and say I think it's fascinating to me because whenever we did core value exercises, I did not understand the point. I was like, look, I'm just picking words and writing sentences. Like, yeah, like I guess these are my values, but I couldn't connect it to like the concrete, how these values actually showed up. And it wasn't until like very recently that I went to a workshop, and again we had to go through all of these lists and talk about like which one of these are our values. And I said something along the lines of like a lot of these are like aspirational values. I was like, I don't know that I embody them right now, but like I would like to. And the facilitator of this workshop was like, the thing that you have to remember is that you can hold a value and not act in accordance with it. So values are sort of your guidelines, they're what guide you. And you can hold a value and not necessarily embody that value, right? And that's just part of like being a person and growing and developing. And for me, that was like kind of a light bulb moment because I was like, oh, okay, so in thinking about like what are the things that are really important to me, like what would a perfect world, a just world like look like? And how do I get there? And so for me, kind of taking these values out of the abstract and to say like, okay, if I value like authenticity, like what does that actually mean? And what does that look like in my life, right? And I think that once I got there, right, it was like, okay, these are all the different ways like authenticity or transparency might show up in my life. But there are always situations in which like sometimes it's particularly as like a queer trans person of color, there are situations where it's like, I would love to like really live into my values and like act in a particular way, but I also have to consider like my own safety and health. And I think that has been really challenging when, my values say that like I need to disrupt something, I need to say something or do something, but my experiences of the world are like, if you do that, you will put yourself in danger. So if you want to survive, like, you can't do that thing, right? And I think, again, going back to like thinking about like, what do these things look like in context, right? So, you know, just because I wasn't able to like act out my values in that particular instance doesn't mean I don't hold those values or that they don't show up in different ways, right? And so I think really, I mean, that is definitely a challenge, but I think being able to like contextualize it to say that like, you know, transparency or authenticity or integrity or all of these things, they don't look just one way, right? They show up in a lot of really different ways. And figuring out what it meant for me to be in different spaces and really embody my values, and that it's not just like a, you know, like, if I want to be authentic, like, I have to be this one way all the time, right? That there are different ways that I can be authentic and value authenticity, and that looks different in different spaces. I think that that was something that was really important for me.
Can I piggyback off you and say, like, would you say that like values are sometimes flexible, or the way you express them is flexible?
Yeah, so I think I really like this idea of like values as being like maps or guidelines, right? So you know, I think about like, all right, my map might say that, you know, this is what this particular value might look like, right? But my map is not always going to have like construction or roadblocks or like thinking about like all of these other things. And so they're not flexible in the sense that like I can like decide like, oh, this value is not important to me anymore, but flexible in that like, you know, while I often think of this value in this particular way, like the behaviors that I think about associated with a particular value, that's not like the be all end all, right? And that there are other ways of kind of maintaining your values. And it is not always obvious, right? It's not always explicit. And sometimes it's really just about like what is going on internally. And for me to do reflection on like, you know, I thought that, you know, like I keep going back to authenticity. Being authentic meant this one thing, and this is how I should have showed up in a space, but I didn't do that. I'm still embodying authenticity if I can do that reflection and see, you know, really like, okay, like what did I do? What didn't I do? What would it have looked like? You know, is it okay that, you know, I acted in a particular way? Like, how was I being authentic in that moment? And really, I keep going back to context as well, right? Like to say that just because it doesn't look the way that you think it is or you think it should doesn't mean that those values aren't showing up, I guess. But it's important to like be intentional about that reflection.
Is this working now? Because this was my own. This wasn't LJ's. Okay. I feel like what I also hear you saying is there's a negotiation in where you stake a boundary and where you know you have capacity. And the authenticity piece comes in when you're doing this work, you have to know yourself. You have to know yourself. And I go back to 16 and I wasn't in college yet, but I promise there's probably at least 20 examples that everybody in this room can think of that were social justice related before you use the language of social justice. When I used to party, I don't party anymore. So maybe not 16, but like 18. But when I would go, if I saw some conflict or tension happening between what looked like partners, let's say it was a hetero couple and there was a cis woman and a cis male and they're in an argument or something like that. I used to be the type of person that would go smack dab in the middle of that disagreement and check the guy. And I just didn't have, like, there was no fear in my brain about what that meant. what I knew was I had been a survivor of intimate partner violence. I didn't want to see another woman engaging in that. And I could see how sweepingly dismissive the guy was being, and didn't matter what the woman's response was. I will not approach that situation the same way now. And I honestly can't tell you how I would. What I would do differently is I would go through a check and balance systems of questions around safety. Is there anyone else who can intervene? How well do I know them to intervene? Do I still intervene but let somebody know that I know who's in my group of people who love me? So then there's like a chain effect. If I go forward, then there's a group of people who can come forward for me and advocate for me. Like, it looks different everywhere. And I think a part of that also, so is being able to assess your own capacity, being able to assess where you stake your boundaries, and also being able to assess where you might stake your privilege. When and where do you not use your privilege? Every single person, by virtue of being a UM student, as much as we love social justice, all of us have privilege in a way that somebody in the deep side of Ypsi, or the deep side of Detroit, or the deep side of Inkster, or Roseville, or Warren, or downriver, those folks may or may not have. And so it's up to us, when we're being introspective and we're asking about our privilege, whether that's along SCS lines, class lines, being a passport holder, because passport privilege is a thing. So there are all these different things you have to, sometimes you may give up something. Sometimes you may have to give up some part of your privilege. And that's not easy. I've been in a situation like that, and I didn't heal from it for like 3 years, maybe 6. I might be in denial, right? I might have lost some friends. I might have put myself in a situation where now I have to think about repairing relationships. And you have to ask yourself, you know, if you already have a support system that's very minimal, which if you work with youth, if you work with queer youth of color, like queer folk in general, like sometimes it's not as easy to dispose of our friendships, because those folk might help us take care of ourselves the next. So it's all different types of things that you have to consider around when you step up and when you don't. And it's not always going to feel good, but that's also a part of the work. So knowing yourself, I think for me, is one of the best pieces of advice that I could offer from personal experiences. So.
If I could kind of jump off that, like knowing yourself, and then also like trusting yourself to navigate the discomfort of a lot of these conversations. So I'm going to kind of like move in a different direction. I've worked a lot with populations with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And one of my favorite things that I will like forever love about this university is having this space where you can be like, well, I'm feeling a lot of feelings right now, and I don't know how to articulate them, so give me a moment to get my crap together. And everybody's like, yeah, take your time, do your thing. So real life's not really like that. And not that this isn't real life, but, you know, okay, so I said I work at a restaurant, and they're all lovely people, do not get me wrong, but they love to use the word retarded. And I'm like, okay, it's 2018, why are you still using this word? But when I first, a couple people used it this one time, and I just remember getting beet red and just being like, I don't even know how to say to them that I'm not okay with them saying this. And so I like had to take a step back, and I had to like really readjust how I articulated something that was an injustice to me, was using a word that's offensive to a certain population of people, to people that weren't used to these conversations and weren't used to these population, or used to these spaces where you talk about things like this. So yeah, that was the first thing that popped into my head when you prompted us with that question. And then to know yourself and to also trust yourself to know the language and to be in uncomfortable situations where you noticed like injustices, whether it's within conversations between people, whether it's the language they're using, whether it's the whatever it may be, to have confidence in yourself that it may not be what you're used to, or you may not have had a situation like that happen to you before, but that you have the equipment and the knowledge and the language to step in and hopefully make a change. Did that make sense? See, I did it again. I love these spaces.
All right, so we're just going to quickly check in. We just want to honor Amy and Chelsea. I know both of you had a bit of a timepiece and that you technically had to leave at 7 o'clock, so we really appreciate you just being present with us and engaging us in conversation. And there's so much more that we want to discuss, but I also want to just do a quick little time check here and ask if you all might be willing to, as we kind of move forward into kind of an open Q&A, would you all, if you have time, you're welcome to join us in that, or if you have to leave, that's okay too. But we wanted to quickly touch on the article for this week, which is, again, all about exploring these challenges as you transition into thinking about your work around social justice beyond your undergraduate education. And so some of those themes that came up in that article from alumni who expressed just issues or areas of concerns that they've sort of undergone or have navigated are around self-care, thinking about burnout culture, building a social justice community, navigating language, which is something that Emily was just talking about in the workspace, navigating hostile or challenging climates. How do you get through that? How do you communicate through it? How do you find allies? How do you find community in that? So just wanting to open it up, maybe starting with Chelsea and Amy, if there are things that have come up for you around your journey in your work around any of these themes or others that have emerged for you too.
I can go. So had a few things to say about values, but I can tie it back to your next question. And so in doing restorative justice, yeah, I'll try to tie in both. So in doing restorative justice work, it's rooted in inquiry and asking questions. And so a value I always try to embody is curiosity. And so staying curious about the young people I work with, the adults I work with, and even in small moments. So like if I am facilitating a circle to resolve a conflict with young people, how am I making sure that I'm asking questions and letting the group be empowered to decide what comes next instead of giving advice? And so I think curiosity has helped me maintain kind of a self-check on my work and being authentic and all the things that the panel was able to speak to. And in terms of self-care, for me, self-care is really about what are the practices that are going to sustain me so that I can do this work for the long haul. And so I think for me, it can be small things. So am I surrounding myself with people that fill my bucket and relationships that add more to my life than take away? And so making sure that I nurture and make time for friendships and family that's important to me, but also do practices that make sure that I'm like just maintaining a level of care for myself. So am I eating lunch during the school day, and am I making time to do things that I enjoy and having hobbies outside of work? And I think leaving U of M, I was a great student and a great student activist. I didn't really build out a lot of hobbies other than hanging out with my friends. And so in my early 20s and adult life, it's been nice to find, okay, what are things outside of work that bring me joy that can also sustain me so that my whole life and my whole identity isn't caught up in what my job is. And I think also being able to build out friendships through that has been crucial in the last few years too. So, and some of that is like we made the choice to move to Colorado because there's so much out here that we love to do. And so being able to make those choices in balance has been key. Yeah. Chelsea, you can jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. I agree with a lot with what you were saying there. But I was going to touch on first, Katie, your question was about kind of your philosophy on social change. And I remember, I think it was one of our last papers that we had to do was kind of defining your, what is social justice to you? And I think for me, the biggest thing is making sure that you're flexible into learning and to continuing that philosophy, not putting a definition on your philosophy, but allowing it to like continue to grow. Just in your introductions, you guys all, introduce yourselves with your pronouns. And back when we were in CASC, that wasn't part of our conversations. We weren't really talking about what do we all want to define ourselves in that same way. And so I think that just goes to show you how, in the last 5 or 6 or however long ago we graduated, how much has really changed and how important it is to stay open to all the different changes that are happening and continue to learn so that your philosophy continues to grow. And so that's kind of what I wanted to say about philosophies, is just being open and letting the process, like letting yourself learn along the way and continuing to grow from that. And in terms of self-care, one of the big things I'm working on is learning to say no. I'm definitely one of those that says yes to everything, because I like to do a lot of things and I like to fill my time, and I look at it as like, oh, I don't have class on Mondays now, so now I can do this, but then that just means I continue to add on all of these things. So I'm really in this process, especially as I could transition into a career after May, of really understanding my limitations and being okay with whatever limitations I put on myself, so that I don't get burnt out and I enjoy my free time and I have that relaxation. So I think that's a big goal for me. And I know it's the same in undergrad. When I was at Michigan, I like to commit myself to a lot of things as well. So that's my big self-care tip, is starting early on that if you're one of those that says yes to everything, learning your limitations and being okay with it.
Thank you all so much. So if you would like to stay and engage further in our conversation, feel free to. And if you have to depart at this time, we understand and we'll find you later. Oh, cool. You can stay?
For the Q&A. Yeah.
Yay! Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So let's just go ahead and open it back up for other folks here. If there's something more you want to share around values, challenges, and then also these themes around this kind of article piece.
I want to kind of touch on some of the self-care stuff, because I think for me, I think one, we often think about like self-care as like face masks and bubble baths and like bath bombs and like things like material things, right? Like that's, I think that self-care has started to become like commodified, but also and especially as I've been like navigating like chronic health issues and stuff, realizing that like self-care is also like the not fun stuff, right? Like doing my laundry is self-care, like making sure that I am eating 3 meals a day is self-care, and it's not this like really luxurious, like glamorous thing all the time, but sometimes it's literally about like, what do I need to do in order to continue to function? And also, I think focusing on myself in that way to think about like, what do I have the capacity to do, but also understanding in terms of social justice work that it's not about you. And that's something that seems easy to like internalize and think about, but is actually really hard to practice, because I think, Michigan students especially, we have a tendency to do like 700 different things, right? Like we all love really being involved and stuff like that. And it took me a long time to realize that like, I don't have to be the one writing the article or planning the event or heading up this organization. That my contributions can be just as significant if I like show up to the event, right, and participate, or if I am finding ways to support in other ways. It doesn't have to look like this like leadership position or like something that can be put on like a resume or a CV. That like a lot of really important ways you can contribute is just by like showing up in your everyday life, and that is just as important as like, things where you're sort of like at the forefront or taking the lead or whatever it might be. And that's something that took me a really, really long time to figure out. And I mean, it's something that I still struggle with, like, realizing that like I don't have the capacity to be involved in all of the things that I'm really, really passionate about and want to be really invested in, and accepting that and like figuring out like, okay, what is within my capacity, right? It might not be like the really like super glamorous something that will, sort of give me more social capital or like benefit me in some way, right? But how can I still be showing up in ways that are like meaningful? And so that is something that took me a really long time, and I'm still figuring it out, I would say.
I can add to this. One thing I want to say about values that I want to make sure is not taken out of context. Everybody in this room has privilege, but privilege is also intersectional. And when you incorporate power into the equation, then you have a differential relationship between privilege. Does that make sense? So I have a lot of privilege on this campus or in the School of Social Work as a student rep within the School of Social Work Student Union. If I go to certain neighborhoods, nobody knows that, nobody cares. They see my skin color, they see my tattoos, they see whatever. So the way we move about context also matters. So just knowing that we all have privilege, but that is intersectional, and it can shift and change. It can shift and change in our families, etc. As far as self-care is concerned, I mean, the wellness industry, I don't know, it's like $1 trillion industry. And so a lot of my community organizing work, like I said, is based in Detroit. I do healing justice work in Detroit with a collective called Healing by Choice. It's a women of color collective that offers a range of health and healing services on a sliding scale to community organizers, activists, neighborhood level lobbyists, etc. And so whereas we might provide something like Reiki, AcuDetox, ear acupuncture, massage at a protest, because is it really sustainable to go when you can't take care of your health? If you don't have health care, you can't like racial induced and oppression induced trauma and stress is real. Many of us who do this work also suffer from the injustices that we're also fighting. And so how do we make wellness accessible? And so when we talk about self-care, sometimes it's like moving your phone away from your bed. It sounds silly, right? But you have to train your brain to like go to sleep when it's time to go to sleep. It's a lot of things that I think are already named, but the thing that I want to press and center is that self-care can be a part of organizing and something that you do as a collective healing. Today is National Day of Racial Healing. And a lot of different campuses and a lot of people around the country are doing things around that. When you leave here, if you want to just Google healing justice organizing, and you'll see some people who show up. The term was coined by the it was a group of queer Black women in the South who initiated the term and started organizing around the term in the 90s. And then somehow it ended up coming up north, and a lot of us started building off of their work. So if you Google healing justice, you'll learn more about self-care and what that means for organizing and how to like increase our capacity and like stay alive like while we do this work that we really love.
I think I have two things. The first is around like challenges. I think one of the biggest challenges I have as a social worker and in social justice and change work in general is kind of along the lines of what Zari mentioned with intersectionality, is the kind of parsing out of the dynamics with power and privilege and marginalization within the identities that I hold, and that was where CASC was very integral. It wasn't until I was taking IGR that I really stopped to think about dualities within my identity. So for instance, like when I came back to finish school, I was broke as hell. However, like the way that I grew up socioeconomically, regardless of what financial capital I had in that moment, there was still social capital that I possessed and ways that I knew how to move about in the world because of the SES where I grew up that still impacted me even while having limited financial resources, right? Or being a woman who is bi, the fact that I'm very femme, like allows me to pass as a heterosexual woman. And so a lot of the challenge around that was, one, accepting those things, because I think that a lot of people who have intersecting marginalized identities, and I used to be one of them, so, have this kind of like petulant way of being in which it's impossible that they're problematic because I hold XYZ identity, and so I can never say anything that's wrong. You can never hold me accountable for my actions. I can never be offensive. I never have to take a moment to be introspective because woe is me, and I'm so marginalized that I shouldn't ever think about what I say or do, and I will use my identities as a crutch to keep myself from being accountable. That is trash. Don't do that. I used to do it. I'm reformed. Bless. So continuing to think about that as I do work has been important for me because a lot of what that ends up meaning is that there's times where I need to shut up. Like, it's not my time to take up space. It's not my time, if we're talking LGBTQ things and what we're centering is trans folk, like me as a cis woman, it's not my day to like be all up in the mix and take up a lot of speaking space. Understanding that sometimes the privileges that you hold, even if you're working in spaces where you identify with folks, that sometimes it means like you are taking a full back seat, you are quiet, and what you're doing is just being there to support the work and listen, and that's it. And that's hard because a lot of what we're taught in these spaces often is that it's about being seen doing the work, and so it can be hard. Along those lines, also with self-care, I think because there's too much focus on being seen and being known for doing the work that sometimes it becomes a competition. And I remember there was a point where I was talking to my therapist and we were talking about how I was struggling with going to bed on time. And she was like, why don't you go to sleep before like 2? What is happening? And I said, honestly, I just feel like if I go to bed, there's somebody out there who is outworking me and they're going to achieve what I want to achieve because I'm asleep. And like, that's not acceptable. It can't happen. And that was kind of around schoolwork. But sometimes I think that we feel that way about social justice work, that people are outworking us and that we're not doing enough. And so like, well, I went to 12 protests over the last month. So like, what's up? Like, that's not what this is about. And understanding, what it might mean for you to take a step back. How it might be helpful for you to take a step back and reflect and actually not do anything for a moment if you're getting into a space that you doing the work is actually about someone patting you on the back or you outdoing other social justice folks.
So I think, thank you so much for really powerful reflections and insights. So we wanted to take about 10 minutes or so to open it up to you all for questions that you might have. And Amber's got a mic, so perhaps you want to raise your hand if you have a question, and you can either direct it to someone particular or just to the panel itself.
And I will say the mic is important so that Chelsea and Amy can also hear.
Hi, so I had a question for people particularly who have interacted a lot in, I guess, more of the professional or professional world for social work, and that is in your time, I'm sure we've all dealt with people that we disagree with. I'm personally curious about people who are like very well-intentioned, very, very nice people, hard workers, who simply have a significantly different philosophy about how to approach a social challenge that you are working together to solve. So same goal, but much different philosophy. If you want to reflect on how you address that.
I can speak to that a little bit. What was your name? Michael? Yes. Okay. And so in my work, restorative justice is about helping schools figure out ways that we can keep kids in school. So changing discipline policies from being exclusionary and relying on suspensions and expulsions to finding ways to resolve conflict and have sustainable community and relationships. And so I often work with teachers who come from, like, we have some shared values, like we're in education, we're working with young people, but they might not see the value in a restorative approach. And so I think the first part is we need to spend a lot of time getting to know one another. And so, like, for me, in my context, it is a teacher or someone who's working in my school. And so they are part of my community, and I need to build a relationship and get to know them. And maybe at first, like, build that relationship not around this issue that we're trying to have some common ground on, but figure out, like, who they are, like, what do they like to do, what do they care about, like, find maybe, do we have a similar sense of humor? And from there, once you have a relationship, I think there's room to have agitation in the issue and help them through inquiry and questions, help me understand, like, why do they have a different opinion, and help them understand why I'm so passionate about my point of view. And so rarely have I found that, like, just giving advice or explaining my viewpoint works if we don't already have a relationship. I don't know if there's anything else to add for that. Yeah.
Great. Does anyone else want to respond, or we can?
I think sometimes also what can be helpful is figuring out how to incorporate pieces from each approach. So for instance, some of the work that I do is related to Alzheimer's disease. My mother had early onset Alzheimer's, and Black Americans are twice as likely to be diagnosed, but the Alzheimer's Association, which is the largest, like, researcher and holder of the monies, has done a piss poor job of diversity outreach. And so when it comes to staffing and what communities are going into, like, it's not really happening. And so there was a point where we were having a discussion about that, and kind of people were owning that as an entity. And so what they felt was the best solution was church outreach, which is like, that's fantastic, but there's all these other ways that we can do a thing. But they were adamant that the very best way was to go into churches and do these programs and et cetera. But that makes the assumption that, one, that you're going to find everybody that you need to find in the church, and that all these people are going to be not only people of faith but Christians, and two, that you going into a space that's sacred for those people is going to be appropriate and go over well. So we talked about how church outreach could be helpful, especially in the ways that churches sometimes uplift and are anchors for our community, but also saying, well, it's important to be reaching out to doing high school outreach, for instance. So we talked about that because there's a lot of multi-generational Black families, and so the people who are doing caregiving are often younger than you anticipate. So we were able to kind of piece together different ideas rather than just saying it is this one thing that we can do that will solve all the stuff, because that's usually not how it works.
Only thing I'll say to build on that is know your disciplines, ethics, and values. So for social work, it's the NASW, social justice, dignity, competence, integrity, and I'm sure I'm missing one thing. It's all a part of our our professional obligation. And so if you have something in your discipline that allows you to say, hey, I'm sorry, it's not me, it's totally my ethics, and I'm breaking some serious stuff if I don't follow this, that's a safe bet too.
I just wanted to say, kind of similar to what Brittany was saying, is there's a yes and. That is something that CASC taught me. In that, like, right, you can find those pieces, but also there's not one way to do, like, especially when it comes to like some kind of like social issue, like you have to approach these problems from like multiple different like approaches and angles and perspectives. And so like if, you know, the person that I'm working with is like all about like doing things in like a respectable way and focusing on policy while I'm here like burn it down, right? Like figuring out like, okay, we do need people who are like protesting and saying like burn it down and like really agitating in that way. And at the same time, right, we need people working in policy to like figure out like how to solve some of the short term, right, to create like short term solutions, because you know the world is not going to change overnight, right? And so trying to find like where philosophies can fit in different approaches, I think is also really important. And so that's just.
Other question?
Burning question from the audience.
Hi. I'd like to first re-thank all of the panelists for talking about self-care. As someone who has struggled with that during their time in school, it feels really great to hear how y'all have managed to work that for yourselves. So thank you for sharing that experience. My question, I think, is more for the people currently or formerly involved in the MSW program, as far as narrowing down into what tracks you went forward in. How did that process look like for you, and have you reevaluated that either through your time in the program or your time since leaving the program and practicing social work, or in whatever steps you've been along the way?
I can speak to that. And then I might need to go after that question. And so my track in the MSW program was community organization, and I came into U of M social work program very confident I wanted to be an organizer. That was the work I had been doing, and I felt very passionate about macro programming and policy change. I also had a scholarship to be in that track, and so that was really helpful. And on top of that, I was a GSI, and so for me, it fit where I was at in my career and my values at the time to do community organization and community social systems. As I got on the ground, I remember in the school, they're like, great, you're a social worker. Do you know how to do clinical work? And I was like, no, I know how to do programming. And so I think for macro social workers, there will always be moments in your career where you have to re-explain that social work is broader than just clinical work. And I still feel really proud that I did macro social work, but I am moving towards gaining and wanting to gain more clinical skills as I working one-on-one with young people. I'm really passionate about trauma, and so as I want to support youth in healing and thinking about trauma-informed schools, I want to gain some of that clinical experience. And so now it's a few years out of my program, I'm working towards hours to be a licensed clinical social worker, and that's something that if you have more questions about, I'd be happy to talk more with you. But it's a process that will happen pretty much in any state. You need 2 years of work experience, and you need an hour of supervision a week for 2 years. And so by next spring, I'll be done, and I'll be a licensed clinical social worker with a macro background in social work. So I'll have a little bit of both. So I'd be happy to talk with anyone who's thinking about Michigan's program or social work programs, because I could say more and more about my thoughts on that. But I should probably go, everyone. So it was great being a part of this panel. Everyone's amazing. Katie, I miss you so much. I want to catch up soon. And I hope everyone has a good night.
Thank you so much, Amy. Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Quickly. So I came in macro, management of human services. I came in very clear about what I wanted to do. I wanted to co-own a healing justice therapy center so that healing work could be combined with clinical work from a social work background, because social work looks at systems. What I found myself doing, I switched over from macro to micro because my advisor was like, if you want to run something like that, people are going to be more privy to follow your vision if you've been practicing on the ground as a therapist for a while. So I still have the same vision and the same overarching goal. But I became a HRSA scholar. So if anyone is interested in the MSW program and kind of doing more work where you're blending different types of disciplines together, look up the HRSA program. I'm HRSA SUD, which means I do interprofessional clinical work with a focus on people with substance use disorder. What HRSA does in a snapshot, you end up taking classes with people from pharmacy, the medical school, nursing, dentistry, and social work, with the idea that integrated vision is better for the person's healing. And then I'm also a new leader scholar. And so anybody who's interested, apply by the December 1st deadline if you can. I know we're past that, but if you end up applying, later on, the earlier the better. That's where most of the money is.
All right. I think we have time for one more question if there is another in the room.
Hello. So I'm a public policy person. That's my major. But I also am a person who wants to burn it all down most days. So my question is, how do you balance top-down and bottom-up approaches to social change?
I think the first thing is acknowledging that you can't do everything. And so to kind of ask yourself, right, given where I am right now, given what my resources are, what kind of power I have, what will do the most good, right? Because I think sometimes, I'll be in a space where, I'm very much feeling burn it down, this has all got to go, right? But expressing that in, a particular way might not be the best way to get that work done. And it would be totally okay if that's what I wanted to do, right? I'm not advocating for tone policing or respectability politics or anything like that, but sometimes that is a decision that I will think about for myself personally, right? If I really actually want this thing to happen, what do I need to do in order to facilitate that in the best way? And right, asking am I in a space where I can do that right now, right? Because you're not always going to be in a space where, you can talk policy and top down and all of these things. And that's okay too. And so just really understanding where you are, both in terms of yourself as a person, as an individual, your sort of mental and physical state, and also, where you are socially, politically, professionally, and what kind of position you're in, and taking all of those things into account. And I would also say finding other spaces if, right, you're doing this work. And so, for example, if you're doing more top down, where you have to work within a system or within an institutional constraints and things like that, finding other spaces where, even if it's just a group of friends, where you can be burn it all down, right? So so that you're keeping that balance, and you don't feel like you're compromising parts of yourself while doing the work.
I wanted to add on to that. I think that you do see a lot, there's always that kind of conflict of the top-down approach versus the bottom-up. And what I've been noticing, especially in the field of development, is there are organizations that are doing that bottom-up approach. And so I think in terms of finding that balance for you personally, it's really just when you're talking about going and working for an organization, it really is transitioning away from this top-down approach, because we're seeing that it's not actually working. And so I would say, how do you balance it is really just it's doing your research and the way that an organization does its work, the way that you want to do your work, and there's people out there doing it. And I think we are seeing a transition, at least what I've been feeling and seeing, in the way that the type of work that I know people are getting into, and the type of, this type of conversations that I'm having in my graduate program, that is the future of these type of, in the field of development, which is related to kind of community building. And, we could look at the concepts the same internationally and domestically. And so I think I think it's positive. It's a positive future that we have. It's transitioning, and it's just making sure that you find the place that's doing work that you feel passionate about as well. So, yeah.
I'd also say that if you're in a position where you kind of have to be in a top-down life just because I need a job, so that's what it is, that finding places where you can kind of insert, which has already kind of been mentioned, finding places where you can insert the other piece that is a bit more radical, whether it's through conversations or through the policies that you're writing, can be very healing. So even in my job, myself and our chief development officer are kind of the only two people in the agency who are very, very passionate about older adults, despite the fact that Detroit is rapidly aging, and so is the population that's living with HIV. And so we will have these conversations sometimes in his office that are basically like, everyone is absurd, what is going on here, I hate this place, rah, rah, rah. And then we like write a grant that's like very eloquently worded, and then we get the grant, and it's like, well, we have money, so do the thing, you know. Or even when I was, as an MSW student, I was on Central Student Government, and a lot of what we did with writing resolutions was effectively like begging the powers that be to acknowledge us, right? But one of the resolutions we wrote ended up helping to catalyze UHS eventually taking Medicaid, like not just Healthy Michigan Plan, but straight Medicaid at UHS. And so there's ways that you have to word that, because when you're sending the resolution, it's going to all these powerful people and you can't just like cuss them out. But we found ways within the whereas clauses to be like, whereas, what the hell are you doing? Like, people need, like, why am I paying the student fee if I can't go and you know, get the services I need? So there's ways to incorporate it, and then kind of as you grow, because to be honest, like in your early phases of your professional life, a lot of times you kind of just have to know how to play the game until you can do what you really want to do. So figuring out how to not lose yourself during that time where you're kind of navigating that, and then like, rah, if that makes sense, is kind of my advice.
That's awesome. I think we're about at the time where we are going to wrap up, but just before we thank you, just wanted to open up for any kind of last words or thoughts that you wanted to make sure that you shared with the
One
students.
last thing.
Awesome.
In the event that you have the spirit of burning things down, which can be a beautiful thing, also make sure you're exercising the muscle of what you want to see when the thing that you want to come down comes down. That's a really important, like, imagination is a social justice tool.
Things will be messy. You're allowed to change your mind also. Like, I started off in undergrad thinking like, yes, I'm going to do this one thing. This is the thing I'm super passionate about. And then like 3 years later, I was like, yes, this is the thing I'm super passionate about, wrote a thesis on it. And then I started working and I was like, actually, wait, maybe this other thing is cool. And now I'm like, so I went from neuroscience to social science. I considered social work to higher ed, and now I'm in information science, right? But like, I am still doing work that I think is important, and that is like important to me personally. But I've gone through all of these changes, like just because, you know, you've decided on like a particular track. So this is something like people have talked about, like how they got to where they are. Like sometimes it really is like a winding, not so linear journey, and that's okay, and just kind of go with it, and don't like stress out if you're also like, I have no idea what I want to do, because you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out.
Thanks. Yeah, I would say that too. Just to go easy on yourself. You know, it doesn't all work out super perfectly, and everybody's recipe is different. I mean, I could tell a million stories of what my peers are doing, but right now, like, this is what's right for me. So if it feels right, just try to embrace it and know that social change and social justice and social advocacy happens in the smallest of places and the biggest of places. It can happen on your Twitter feed. It can happen in your conversations with your coworkers who are using the R word. It can happen, you know, it just happens in all different shapes and forms. And I think that's all I wanted to say. Oh, wait. Yeah, that's it.
I would say 3 important steps to be doing all the time are self-reflect, self-critique, self-correct. Often as social justice folks or social change agents, we're so fixated on what is going on outside of us that needs to be corrected, and holding other people accountable for their wrongdoings, and not taking time to be introspective and think about what is going on with us, what needs to be critiqued and changed in order for us to be effective. Because if you're not doing that on a regular basis, you're probably bringing toxicity to the spaces that you're trying to change and make more positive.
Chelsea, any final words?
Cool. Yeah. I just enjoy the rest of your senior year of college. I mean, you guys are in such a really cool place. You've made it through. I mean, we all did 4 years at Michigan, so we understand what you're going through right now, and so you're almost there. And I think just what it shows through all of our conversations is everything leads you to the next. So just because you haven't figured it out right now, I mean, I would never have known I would be where I'm at right now when I was graduating Michigan, so I didn't even know where I was going to be doing Peace Corps when I walked graduation. So every single experience kind of leads you to the next. So just, take advantage and enjoy it. And that's kind of where I'm at. So good luck to all of you. And thank you for sharing. And good luck, yeah.
Great, thank you. So before we do a final thank you, just to say that there were lots of powerful ideas shared and thoughts, and no doubt things are sparking for you. And so make sure to take time to reflect on what you heard and be able to kind of take note of ideas or thoughts or questions. There are opportunities to continue these dialogues, I'm sure, with the panelists, but also in your alumni interviews, and then for sure in class next week. So with that, I want to say a huge thank you and have all of you thank these incredible panelists for their time, for their wisdom, and for their thoughts.